Hey everybody, happy Tuesday and welcome into the Volquest podcast. I'm Eric Kane, Rob Lewis, Brent Hubbs, and before we get into anything, out of the transfer portal, in the flesh here on YouTube, that is Austin Price. Austin, glad you gave us here at Volquest some of your time here today.
Well, where did I transfer to, Kate? I mean, you were gone for a week too for your honeymoon.
Although Hub said you were in the transfer portal and you took your name out last night, so you're back.
I got,
Needed a better NIL deal, Rob Lewis. Peter Millard wasn't enough.
He's tanned, rested, and ready.
I wouldn't say tanned, Rob. I would go more, burnt. But I mean, that's fair complexion people. The South Pacific sun hits you a little different.
How many videos you get done?
Videos as it pertaining to like what?
No, recruiting videos. That's why you're gone, right? How many videos you get done?
Zero, because I did field a few phone calls and my wife was decent about that. So, give her credit. At no point did she go, "Ugh, are we on a vacation or not?"
When you know you got the one. Good to have Austin Price back here from the Polynesian Bowl and, of course, Hawaii here on the Volquest podcast. And glad you guys are here with us as well, watching on YouTube, liking this video, and subscribing to the channel as always. Big news over the last couple of days, Tennessee basketball. Fifth straight win over a top 10 opponent inside Thompson-Boling Arena. Takes down Texas in the SEC Big 12 Challenge. Rick Barnes gets the better of his former team. And Rob Lewis, that was a big win for Tennessee in a number of different ways. Obviously, you can go the Olivia Cumwall factor, the Scott Ziegler factor, or just the fact that it was a really good win, a resume win for a team that's not going to get that chance too often down the stretch here.
Yeah, with as down as the SEC is right now, excuse me, with Alabama, being the only team that really hasn't been a disappointment. That is, other than you play Alabama February 15th, and that's going to be your last crack at a top 10 team unless you catch Alabama again in the tournament, or unless, Kentucky or Auburn, somebody gets crazy hot and rattles off 10, 12 wins in a row, which I don't see happening. So that was significant. I mean, And again, it's nobody would have thought that when you have Kentucky and Arkansas ranked, top 10 in the preseason. But the way this league has worked out, that ended up being, kind of, I think, a bigger deal for Tennessee on Saturday than anybody would have thought 2 months ago.
Brent, we were over there watching, that game when we were kind of working junior day. We watched the majority of the first half uninterrupted. And Olivia Cumwall, it's like he couldn't miss there in the first half. He was a big reason why Tennessee jumped out to the leads it did at points in times in the game. A 27-point effort, 8 rebound. He's not going to do that every single game for Tennessee, but if you can find some type of consistency there, I think Tennessee can reach a new level with that post presence from Olivia.
Well, but Rob said it best on the Rocky Top Rewind. I mean, the guy's a senior at this point. I mean, it is. I'm with Rob. I don't know that there's a quote light bulb moment that was suddenly the switch is flipped and he's going to be, the king of consistency. Now you'll see, we'll see what happens moving forward. You hope that he is, but when Tennessee gets post play like that, it changes the dynamics and the outlook of Tennessee a lot. And we'll see. I mean, the thing about this team is Rob, I think that the best thing about them is they're rooted in their defense, because offense is going to come and go. I mean, even in the tournament, it's hard to have 6 great offensive, nights in the tournament to get yourself to the finish line. I'm not saying Tennessee's going to the Final Four. I'm not ready to go there yet, but to have a chance, you've got to be able to play consistent defense. And as great as the Cumwall story was, Tennessee was as good in the first half against Texas defensively as they've been all year in the first half. And I think that's the biggest thing about this basketball team as the calendar page turns tomorrow to February.
I said this on the Nation Sunday night, and I agree with what Rob's saying here. You are kind of who you are. Like, you had those first 2 games in the month of January. He didn't miss a shot, right? Then he goes into a couple-game lull where he was just not very good at all. Then he comes back with, 27 the other night. I think for Tennessee, they can't afford to have the combination of Cumwall inside and Vescovy outside both have bad nights. When that happens, that's when they have those Colorado performances, or the Kentucky performance. I think you've got to have both, at least one of those guys on their game. If one of them is on, the other one can afford to be off because some other guys will step up. To me, it's those two combination. Yeah, there are other players you can look at like Josiah Jordan-James or Zakai Ziegler that are probably going to be a little more consistent than those two. But to me, the one that takes them over the top offensively inside is Kumwa, outside is Vescovy. And if Tennessee can at least have one of the two hitting on a given night, they're going to still be pretty good. If they have them both off, that's when they have those just awful nights.
Yeah, I would agree because at least from an offensive perspective, in the front court, if it's not Olivier, Uros, had a game, of course, but you're not going to see that too far between. Of course, Julian Phillips has had his moments as a freshman, and then some of those other players, Jonas Sadu and Toby Awaka, they're not really an offensive presence whatsoever right now. So if you're not getting it from Olivier, you best be getting it from Vesky or somebody on the outside.
I'm gonna disagree a little bit here. I mean, and Rob can jump in if he want to. I think obviously, that they need Vescovy to play really well, but this is the same team, and I know Georgia's not as good as Texas, Rob, but it's the same Tennessee team that scored 60 points without anybody in double figures against Georgia just 4 nights earlier. I think the thing they have to do is their defense has to show up and travel, and as it has all year, and they've got to rebound the basketball. If they're going to do that, then I think that's what they're going to do. I mean, they can't go over with Santiago, but I don't think it's got to be that, Santiago's got to have 20 or 25 if Kumwa doesn't show, or Kumwa's got to have, 20 plus if Vescovy doesn't have a great night. I think they have enough weapons that they don't have to have somebody just go off for them to beat a high quality team. Maybe I'm wrong, but to me, it doesn't feel like that's where this team is right now.
Rob, sorry to jump in front of you, but is it fair that with the way Zakai is playing right now, that might not be true, but a month ago, maybe it was true?
Yeah, I think with the way Zakai is playing, that takes a lot of pressure off Santiago to hunt his own offense. And I think you can get by with him having an off night. I think you essentially have, 5 double-digit scores. Guys that can go out there and get you double digits. As long as 2 or 3 of them show up, and you play the kind of defense that Hubbard's talking about, it's going to get you over the hump most nights. At least they'll get you over the hump against the Georgias and the Ole Misses of the world. But to beat Kentucky, to beat Arkansas, to beat Alabama, I think you're going to have to do something offensively.
You look at the box score from Tennessee against Texas, and Barnes played 10 guys as he normally does, but the only one that got extensive, double-digit minutes off the bench was Tyreek Key, Rob. But again, only shot it 3 times. Was 0 for 2 from 3-point range, finished with 1 point. Hit a really strong showing his first game from the bench with that, I think it was 7 or 8 rebounds and 10 points, near a double-double. Tyreek Key, again, kind of another guy that's been pretty inconsistent so far this season, but now adapting to a new role. Kind of what do you see from him moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think just kind of what we've seen the past couple of games. I think for whatever reason, he's having a hard time finding his offense. Not as aggressive as I know Coach Barnes would like to see him. I vividly remember him turning down 1 3 the other day, pretty early in the clock, but still, I mean, the kind that the coaching staff is imploring guys to take. And he's shooting a pretty good percentage from 3. It's not like he's ice cold, but for whatever reason, it just has not clicked for him yet. And it's been, I know a month ago I felt like it was on the verge of happening, and he's not been bad. I mean, you mentioned he was really good on the glass the other night. He's been a very solid defender, way better than I would have anticipated, but also thought that he would come in and hit a bunch of threes and be a guy that could give you some scoring pop some nights, and that just hasn't been the case lately. And I don't know what the answer for that is.
He's still a better option than Justin Powell would have been.
I actually caught a little Justin Powell hooping it up for the Washington State Cougars the other night against Arizona.
Oh, I'm sure he's fine out there. I just think he was just a bad fit here for how Rick coaches. I just don't think he ever kind of had any confidence.
No, and he just had a hard time fitting in.
Speaking of confidence, a lot of times the point guards at Tennessee or whoever's coached by Rick Barnes don't have a lot of confidence. But Zakai Ziegler playing with so much confidence right now. I'm not saying he's the best point guard Rick Barnes has ever coached. That'd be a tall task. But is he playing as well during this little spurt here? Rob, Brent, you can jump in. Is he playing as well as any other point guard Rick Barnes has coached at Tennessee?
No,
he's on another level.
He's playing way better than any point guard Rick Barnes has coached here. Now, he's probably not playing better than TJ Ford or DJ Augustin or some guys like that in the past. But I don't think it's close for anybody that Rick has had here. that list is pretty much what Jordan Bone and Kennedy Chandler. And, Kennedy was, had he stayed, who knows what we might be seeing from Kennedy. But the way Zakai's playing right now is just off the charts.
Yeah, and it's in part because of his mentality and his ability to handle. I mean, he got fired in the Colorado game. I mean, he got sent to the bench in the Colorado game, and Robbie didn't flinch by it. I mean, like, he handled it, and he handles it himself. It's not his team of people that are this, that, the other. It's he can take the hard coaching from Rick Barnes and seems to thrive with it. And I think that's part of the reason why he's doing really well. And I think that's why part of the reason Rick Barnes has always loved Zakai Ziegler is just the mental toughness that he plays with.
Because I think he gets rode by his mom, from the stands just as hard as he does Coach Barnes. I mean, the kid when you grow up in Brooklyn and you're 5 foot nothing, and I think he's hardened to the hard coaching. I mean, I think it just makes him stronger. It's what he likes. It's what he prefers. It's what he's used to. A lot of kids melt down in that instance, but this kid, and luckily for Tennessee, they've got him for a couple more years. Is really, really, really good when he has the heat on him from Coach Barnes.
Got another week at Tennessee ranked inside the top 10, well, top 5, mind you. And, of course, Ken Palm has Tennessee as this number 1 team. You've got the net rankings where Tennessee's at number 2. Tennessee's got quad a resume now, quad 1 wins now up to 4-1 on the season. And this was posed in the Rocky Top Rewind the other night. And, Rob kind of gave his 2 cents. But Brent and Austin, I mean, you look at the rest of the way for Tennessee. Of course, you got Florida and Auburn this week. Florida on the road coming back for Auburn. Got Vanderbilt next week, Alabama, that monster showdown on the 15th, of course. Then you go to Lexington, so that's going to be a pretty tough 2-game swing, a Wednesday to Saturday as well, so that makes it even tougher. You got Arkansas at the end of the year, and then Auburn again. I mean, how many losses? And I know it depends on the matchups and everything, and every game is different, but, I mean, there's not a lot of losses left on this schedule outside of that 2-game swing that'll be challenged.
Well, I mean, here's the thing that you learn, though, right? I mean, who had Alabama getting beat by 30 at Oklahoma? I mean, basketball's hard. I mean,
Yep.
and that's why you don't see teams go undefeated, Rob. That's why, I mean, there are some days where you just don't have it, and Alabama didn't score against Oklahoma, but their defense was worse than their offense. And that's why I think fans should appreciate this Tennessee team, because their defense has showed up every night, which is harder to do. They don't let their offensive woes, if they have a struggle or a lull, they don't allow those to affect them on the defensive end. Their defense dictates their offense. But, I mean, yeah, you can be favored in a bunch of those, Rob, but that doesn't mean, as we've learned, as you know, that doesn't mean anything in college basketball when you're playing twice a week, right?
No, I mean, especially on the road. I mean, if you don't show up and you're just a little off, I mean, it can snowball on you in a hurry, just like we saw, with Alabama the other day. I mean, does anybody all of a sudden think Alabama is not one of the best 4 or 5 teams in the country? I mean, I know I don't. I just think they had a horrible day, against a desperate Oklahoma team. But to Eric's point, I would say Tennessee be favored in every game the rest of the way, except for maybe at Auburn. And I kind of would be surprised if Tennessee loses again at home.
Austin, Saturday night after Tennessee took care of Texas, John Rothstein of CBS Sports, he tweeted, "Given the landscape of college basketball, this is Rick Barnes' best chance to get to a Final Four at Tennessee. Vols don't have a star, but have more than enough to get to Houston." You can't predict a Final Four. I mean, Tennessee's never been to a Final Four. That's not the expectation. But anyway, you can't predict it if you're Duke, Kentucky, any of those blue buds. However, I do agree with him so much by saying Tennessee doesn't have a star, but they've got a lot of solid players. And, with all those guys hitting at the same time, this is a pretty dangerous team. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and that's to Hubs' point from earlier about, the defense traveling. I mean, when's it not traveled for this group? I mean, it really has traveled every game. It just boils down to, can they make enough shots when they have those off nights to overcome, the bad offense. And, they are a real threat to make it to the Final Four. But we all know that it boils down to kind of, how this thing gets seeded out, upsets. I mean, Duke gets upset by, I forget who it was, Davidson, whoever it was in Raleigh that year. And Tennessee ends up getting to go all the way to the
Mercer.
Sweet 16 with Conzo. Oh, it's Mercer. Yeah, that's right, Mercer. Getting to go with, all the way to the Sweet 16 with Conzo, going from, one of the first four in to the Sweet 16. It's all about matchups. It's all about upsets. It's all about, kind of your path. And so, who knows what that looks like when, we get to mid-March. But, this team, has a certain it factor to it and a certain toughness to it. And, I think that's the biggest thing is they're not mentally weak. They may not make it to Houston, but it will not be because they melted down, I don't believe. I think it'll just be because they went cold on a bad night and lost a 55-53 type game or 60-58 type game. Ultimately, I think that, it just boils down to, can they make shots? If they do, I think this team really is a Final Four team, if not better than that.
Rob, let me ask you this. I mean, you've seen this team play through 20-plus games now. What when you talk about matchups and everything, what type of team do you envision giving Tennessee the biggest challenge? What's the hardest matchup for Tennessee when you look at them from a like a player personnel or a schematic standpoint? When you look at this team, what's kind of the kryptonite that this team has to battle through against somebody?
I probably wouldn't call it kryptonite, but just like really, plus size, like Arkansas or Arizona threw at them, with a couple, two bigs that can really play, not, one big that's pretty good and one big that's just out there because he's 7'1" and athletic. I think what Kentucky did to Tennessee on the glass was kind of an outlier, but I do think that that's what would worry me the most. Is they're going to have to, whoever beats Tennessee is going to have to be good at guard. But I think they're going to have to be really, really big and really get after Tennessee on the glass. Because I think if Tennessee goes two bigs, if they're playing Adu or Plagic together, no, thank you. I don't enjoy that at all. I think they're by far at their best when Josiah's at the 4, and I think if somebody has enough size to where they, make that uncomfortable for Tennessee to play with that lineup, then I think that's Tennessee's best chance to really struggle.
What about Adu and someone else not named Plavsic?
I like Adu at the 5 with Jonas at the 4.
Yeah,
fine. I like that lineup just fine. I mean, you can't really call that small ball because Jonas is so big, but you really are. I mean, you're playing 1 out or 1 in 4 out, pretty much. But I'm totally fine with Adu getting a lot of those minutes, but not on nights when Olivier's going 12 or 15 from the field.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt about it. Tennessee's at Florida on Wednesday. We'll turn around and come back home to take on Auburn on Saturday. That is the schedule for this week. And next Saturday, there will not be a junior day on campus. The 2 junior days for January have come and gone. Austin Price, this past weekend, not as many guys came in who once said they were coming in, but still a nice crop was on campus. And the headliner was 4-star defensive edge rusher Cam Franklin. Wanted to come in to feel like he was a priority. He got in late on Saturday. He, in a couple hours, felt like he was that priority. He finished up his visit on Sunday morning. That's a guy that Tennessee wanted to get in good position with, and I think did a good job this weekend.
Yeah, and that's one that Rodney Garner has targeted for well over a year. Rodney's got, some ties over there in the, North Mississippi area where Cam plays. Those two are fairly tight. That one will be more of a thrill a minute, though. It's not like it's going to be some lay down for Tennessee or lay down for Ole Miss. I mean, I think that you're going to have everybody involved, and it's going to be, a back and forth thing. But I'd be shocked if Tennessee isn't one of his 5 official visits. There's some people around, him that, have some orange, ties, and I think Tennessee will be a factor for him long term. And, I think this weekend was big. Talked to Chad Simmons. He talked to us leaving junior day, told both the same thing about, feeling like he's a priority here, and this was the first visit his mom's ever been on. He's been on several visits, but it's not been with her. This was a visit that she came on. It's the first time she's been out, seeing the college campus. And I'd say you'll see her take more visits, but Tennessee was the first. And I think she liked everything that she saw about Tennessee. I think they enjoyed the basketball game. The good news is they got here for the basketball game, and then were able to stay in the midday, early afternoon on Sunday. But I would expect Tennessee to be, a factor there long term. And then, just staying with defensive linemen, I think Tennessee's going to be a real factor with Bryce Young, Bryant Young's son. I think it's Tennessee, Notre Dame. Now, Notre Dame is his dad's alma mater, former San Francisco 49er. But I don't think that Bryant and his wife are pushing like their kids go to Notre Dame or whatever. Like, he's got a sister that goes to USC. He had a sister, I think, that went to Virginia Tech, maybe. Like there are, there's not like hey, you've got to go where I played. And honestly, Hubbard, if you look at the last, 3-4 years, you see less legacies following their dad than you did 10 years ago. I'd still say it's over 50%, but I felt like a decade ago, it was like 90-95% of the time they followed wherever their dad went. Now it's more like 60, 65, 70% of the time. Agree?
Yeah, and I think part of that, Austin, is there's so much. It's so different than when their parents played. And look, I mean, I'm not saying that. Wow, there's a different coach there. Of course, there's a different coach there, right? I mean, it's 20 plus years, but the feelings of the schools are very different. And I think that that they may live in different states. I don't think there's the pressure to play at your parents' alma mater because that's what you're supposed to do, like there was, maybe years ago. I just, it just doesn't feel that way. I mean, I go back to and it circles around social media from time to time. Emmitt Smith, when his son committed to Stanford, he was at a press conference and they asked him about it. And he was like, look, man, my son is supposed to go wherever he wants to go. And I think that's the world we live in now. I just don't think I don't think parents put the pressure on their kids to go to their alma mater. And I don't think the parents feel the pressure to send their kid to their alma mater like they did years ago.
Well, I talked to Dominic Raiola out at the Polynesian Bowl because, Dylan will be in this game a year from now. And, obviously there's a lot of pressure for him to go to Nebraska because that's where Dominic played. And, clearly they are, Nebraska is a factor for them, especially since he's opened things back up and decommitted from Ohio State. But, I mean, Georgia, USC, I mean, there are a lot of big time schools interested in Raiola. And, I think that, Dom's not going to push his kid to Nebraska. If Dylan does it organically, then Dominic will be thrilled. But I think ultimately, he's going to pick where he wants to go. And I think you're right. I think that you're seeing more and more of that. Again, I'd still say it's over 50% of the time that, the legacies go where their dad went, but it is not near the percentage it was several years ago.
Austin, a question we get asked all the time, really in each cycle, 23 at the end of it, but 24 asking, looking ahead. Running back recruiting. It feels like Tennessee's been in with some. I know last year's class wasn't that strong, but didn't land a big one. And then there were, 3 or 4 that said they were going to be here, but only one showed up. But the one that showed up was a big one.
The one that showed up is the one that's at the top of the board.
Yeah, Jordan Marshall. And, Matt and I both talked to him afterwards, and he couldn't say enough good things about his time here at Tennessee. Is that the one that Tennessee wanted, and what type of position should Tennessee be in now moving forward?
Well, they would love to have Daniel Hill, who's not too far from Tuscaloosa. Alabama's a factor for him, Mississippi kid. They'd love to, get some of these other guys in here. Kid at Arkansas that's very much, on Jerry Mack's radar. But number one, in my opinion, just based off of his interest level, his communication level, the fact he's visited for camps and games and stuff, is Jordan Marshall. And so for him to make it back in, I thought that was big for Tennessee. He's going to be a who's who, probably northern schools. But, I mean, this is a kid that, Tennessee really likes a lot, and he likes Tennessee. I don't think that this is some lay down for Ohio State if they push. Obviously they'll be tough. They'll be really tough, if they go hard on Jordan Marshall. But I don't think it's a lay down. And, his interest level in Tennessee has been there for going on near a year. And, I still think that right now, he's the most realistic option at the tailback spot for Tennessee.
I was surprised, though, to hear him say, that he's still learning that this is not a pass-happy offense, that they actually run the ball in this offense. Austin, given the number of times he's been here, the games he's seen, the conversations he's had, and maybe that was just kind of a one-off quote in conversation there, but I was a little surprised for a guy who has as much knowledge of Tennessee as he does, that he was still talking about Tennessee trying to get over the stigma of being a pass-happy offense and not a balanced offense.
Yeah, and I think that just kids, they see kind of what they want to see at games. They get distracted.
Good point.
And so maybe they're not paying as close of attention as they should be, or looking at the final stat sheet going, man, Tennessee ran the ball 44 times in that game.
Right. It's a good point.
I mean,
they see the big splash play, right? Guys wide open.
Well,
they throw 3 touchdown passes. They throw it all the time.
It's why in the post on Sunday night, that Navy got 44, and I would give him grief about his Harrison Bailey takes for years. But I said that's probably the best take you've ever had, given the take about Willie Martinez. And I said you're looking at big picture instead of just like, okay, they gave up 14 third down conversions, but they threw it 44 times compared to other schools that see 29 passes. I mean, like the secondary has to hold up so much more because Tennessee gets ahead and other teams are forced to throw. So like I think everybody kind of gets caught in looking at what's right here, but you got to be able to look out wide with the peripherals, and I think that's kind of where Jordan Marshall and a lot of recruits are. They just kind of see what's directly in front of them, and they don't ever look side to side and realize, oh, actually that's not near as drastic as I thought. And so again, I think running back somewhere Tennessee's got a hit on in this class, whether it's Jordan Marshall, or Daniel Hill or whoever, it's a very important position in this 2024 class.
Yeah, I mean, I've said this before, and I'm not picking on that quote from Jordan Marshall whatsoever, because you're a recruit, you're being recruited by 15, 20 schools in the country. I mean, you're not dialed into the stat sheet and everything like we are, but I mean, second year in a row, Tennessee's averaged over 200 yards rushing a game. Tennessee led the nation in rushing touchdowns this season. So any running back, I mean, this is a very appealing offense if you're a running back. Plus, Josh Heupel himself has continued to be quoted over the 2 years he's been here saying we can't accomplish what we want to if we don't start with the run game. So I think that should speak to any running back out there, not just Jordan Marshall.
Yeah, Braylon Russell was the running back from Arkansas, by the way.
2 more guys I want to ask you about before I ask a big picture question. Something Brett and I discussed on the Rocky Top Rewind a little bit with Matt. I think the question was actually posed like if there's one thing Heupel can improve on, or if there's one negative thing about Heupel so far, what is? And this really isn't a negative thing whatsoever, but we did mention it's a line of scrimmage league. I mean, it might be an offensive league, but you still got to be good in the trenches. Offensive line recruiting is going to be massive. It always will be. And 2 massive guys, 2 big old guys who are on campus on Saturday, Ethan Callaway and Kevin Haywood. What's Tennessee's big picture look like on the offensive line for this class of 2024 with those 2 guys who are on campus?
Well, with Cam coming off the board and committing to South Carolina early, now I wouldn't call that one dead over, right? I mean, like he's committed early to the home state school, but South Carolina's got a lot of momentum right now, but that can all go away if they start slow this fall. And then you can see the kids open things back up. Daniel Calhoun's a massive mountain of a kid, was just here. Again, that's going to be hard. Georgia, Alabama, everybody's going to be involved for him. Ethan Callaway and Kevin Haywood, are 2 big kids. I think you're going to continue to see them rise in recruiting over the next several months. And if Tennessee could somehow be a factor for those 2 kids, and I think they will be, that would be big because you've got to add multiple tackles again in this class. I don't think what you did in 23 was enough. I think offensively, on the offensive line, you've got to be better. And I'm not saying Tennessee's bringing in bad linemen, but what I'm saying is Tennessee's bringing in linemen that need a year or 2. You also need a couple of guys that can come in and if push come to shove, Hubbard, they can go out there and play for you.
You need more tackles.
The offensive line is more of a developmental position, but like for my liking, they've got to be in the weeds with some more big-time guys at the offensive line position.
Yeah, I mean, I think it starts with they've got to be involved in more tackle bodies.
There you go.
That look, you get them and you develop them. If they don't work, they slide inside. What you don't want to do is you don't want to live year to year in a transfer portal looking for a tackle body. That's what you got. That's where they've got to get to. I don't know. And look, I think Darnell Wright has got a chance to go down and really help himself this week, right? At the Senior Bowl. and he got thrown into the lineup, but he wasn't ready to play. Okay. And I know there's a lot of these guys that are saying, well, he's ready as a freshman. Very few are. I mean, there's some guys who can survive. Don't get me wrong. We've seen guys survive. I mean, Darnell survived. Lots of guys have survived through the years, Jawan James and guys, but were they really ready to play? Tennessee's got to get to the point where they're bringing in some guys, and this is hard to do with the transfer portal because those guys don't have patience, right? But you got to get some guys in here that you can give a little playing time, maybe you can get them into 4 games and some blowouts, and you can develop and really get them ready to play in year 2. Because I think if you're sitting here going, all right, we need to be in the weeds to get an immediate impact player, man, that's hard because they're not going to be in your home state, right? I mean, like look at Calhoun. Calhoun's probably the guy who has a chance to play early because he's a mountain of a man. He likes Tennessee. He's in Georgia. And Georgia's recruiting him, and Alabama's recruiting him. Cam Pringle is sitting here. He's in South Carolina. I mean, you're not going to have 2 or 3 in the state of Tennessee on any kind of regular basis where you say Tennessee's got a great chance to get an impact guy at offensive tackle. That's why they've got to get more tackle bodies and see what they can develop. I would try to take 4 tackle bodies a year in a class, and knowing that you're probably going to lose 2 of them, right? But I would continue to recruit, and I would even take some chances on some tackle bodies to hope that you hit on some guys in development.
Yeah, I don't disagree at all. I think when you look at, kind of where they are, on the offensive line, I think they're fine guard to guard. It's just going to boil down to, especially next fall, can any of those younger guys take a step? Can Glenn Ellerby develop those guys? Again, can he be the Rick Barnes of the offense for Josh Heupel? Because Rick Barnes, if you look at Josiah James, his shot when he first got here and his shot now, Kevin Punter shot when he first got here, his shot now. You've got to see some of these kids like a Brian Grant or whoever, take a big leap, and I think that's kind of what we've got to see, out of the offensive line to make me feel like offensively they can handle out on the edges at tackle going into 23. Because right now you're relying on John Campbell, new in your program. You don't know what he's about. I mean, he may be awesome, good as gold, but I mean, you just don't know. I mean, he just got here. I mean, how does he mesh with everybody? I mean, you're relying on J.J. Crawford and Gerald Mincy, 2 guys that, either couldn't stay healthy or couldn't stay on the field last year. And they kind of brother-in-lawed it and, got through the season. But I mean, you really need a younger kid at tackle to really take a step this spring where you exit spring going, okay, we can work with that this fall. Who is that guy? I don't know.
I agree with Hubs. And again, you took some guys, and I'm with you. I don't think Tennessee took bad offensive linemen, but like Bison Lang, Messiah Reddick, Mo Clipper, those guys were never, ever, ever going to play year 1. And again, those are more interior guys. Look at Andre Carrick. He was a tackle. He's played tackle, but he can slot in and play guard. It's not impossible. You guys have been covering this a lot longer than I have, but it's more difficult to recruit a guard and try to make him a tackle, whereas get a tackle body who can play guard. Tennessee does not have enough tackles right now, and you've seen them attack the transfer portal for offensive tackles the past 2 seasons. So that's got to be a massive priority in this class. It's got to be, in my opinion. Tennessee was involved in some big fish at tackle loss in this past year, but of the 4 they liked, only got 1. And that's just not enough.
Well, and Hubs is going to agree with me.
I am.
Yes, their board's got to be bigger.
Oh, absolutely.
At all positions.
100%.
If you look back at wide receiver a year ago, I just don't think their board was big enough. I mean, they kept swinging, trying to get, Noah Rogers to campus deep into the fall. He never came. Yeah. They didn't really do a whole lot with the kid from Mississippi. They kind of flirted with him, went back and forth. Obviously they tried on Carnell Tate. But I mean, and they got a great find in Nathan Laycock. But I mean, to me, they've got to have a board of 15 to 20 instead of a board of 5 or 6. And that's kind of what it felt like last year. It's like, okay, well, if you don't get this guy, who are you turning to? And there was never really an answer. It can't always be the portal. And that's the thing is getting, they've just, They to me at all positions. I'm just using wide receivers as an example on last year, but I mean like at all positions, their board has to be bigger. In my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, and I mean, I think you could throw running back into that equation. I mean, you could throw a lot of positions into that equation. I agree with you 100%. I think it was the best thing Philip Fulmer did. Okay, in terms of recruiting, when you talk about why did they recruit so well? Obviously, they won, and I get all that, but I mean, they were sitting there and they would visit, they would visit 8 defensive ends trying to get one. I mean, Philip Fulmer used almost 56 visits every year. Like he visited all. Now I know it's different now because kids commit early, and lots of times now we're seeing official visits or victory laps for guys, and I know everything has totally changed. Don't get me wrong, but the point is their board was deep at all positions. If they needed 2 defensive ends, they were going to be recruiting 15 defensive ends to try to get 2. Right now, you had your pecking order. You didn't just take number 15 as soon as he wanted to commit, but you were recruiting that deep, Austin, to get someone that was there. So you weren't just starting to recruit someone in the last few weeks when your board dried up. And I think that's something that Tennessee can address and will address moving forward. I think they have to have deeper boards.
You look at the class right now, Tennessee's got 3 commits for the class of 2024. There'll be a junior day in March, and of course, prospects on campus to watch spring practice whenever that starts. You look at this compared to last year's class. Tennessee, if my memory serves me correct, came into January with 2 commits, picked up a commit from Aiden Bustle at the end of the month. Saying all this, asking Austin kind of what's the path here for Tennessee in terms of what's next for the class of 2024. I feel like the movement is not much right now in terms of a commit. That'll be later in the spring, but kind of where does the traction lie for this 2024 class?
Well, I think you get those questions on the board because they look at South Carolina's landing all these kids right now.
Yeah.
They're taking a bunch early, and we'll see if they're able to stick, if they're able to hold, and we'll see what happens with some of those kids. Tennessee took Mazio Bennett early, and then he reopen things back up. And I mean, he'll say South Carolina's the leader, but I mean, he's visiting Alabama and Miami and all these places. I think I'm not going to close the door on February. I think there's an outside shot that they could get one in February, but I think March and April are going to be their months. In my opinion, and so I think that you're going to see a few come off the board in March and April.
Yeah, I think it's about who they get back on campus in March, and I'm not discrediting January. Okay, I'm not saying January.
I think you need Franklin back on campus in March.
Yeah, I mean, and you got to. I mean, you got to get the running back back. I mean, you got to get people back on campus. And again, I'm not discrediting January because I think junior days are important. Anytime you can get a guy on campus, that's where it's at. That's what you need to do. But I think March, is such a bigger month. March and April, and the reason is, unless the kid's a baseball player, he can visit, right? I mean, you can miss a track practice. Right now, if you're a basketball player, your coach is not wanting you to go gallivanting off on a bunch of unofficial visits right now because you got tournament time coming up. Same thing in wrestling and other things. So it makes it a little more challenging to get some guys on campus in January. I think Tennessee's got to get more guys on campus in January if they're going to have 2 junior days. But I think March will continue to evolve into a bigger recruiting month or a more important recruiting month than January because kids get to see things. Going to basketball games are great. All right. I mean, that's all good and well. These kids want to see practice. They want to be in the meetings. They want to see what it's really like to be a part of the program. That's why I think March visits are becoming more and more important than the January unofficial visits are for junior days. Because Austin, maybe I'm wrong, but don't you think kids are less interested in the show? Less interested in the event type deal, and more interested in seeing kind of the ins and outs of it.
I think some of them are. I would call it the Instagram recruits are about the show. And there are some of them. And then there are some that are very smart and methodical. And those are the ones you're talking about that don't really care about the photo shoots, don't really care about basketball games. They want to go in there and they want to have an hour sitting there in a skull session with their position coach. And they want to go in a meeting room in spring practice. And they want to go on the practice field and see how the coach coaches his room in spring practice. Those are the kids you're talking about. And I do think there are more and more of those kids, yes. But there are still that pocket of, I call the Instagram recruits, where they need to be able to throw out their photo shoot and pictures and put their Instagram stories out there, that they're at practice and that type of thing.
We all have those friends we call Instagram friends. They go swimming with turtles. They post it on Facebook and Instagram. And
Hey,
That's me.
I want to ask this. I know we're out of time, but I want to ask this question because this is just something that I've kind of wondered about. And I want to ask both of you this question because you both follow recruiting and know everything going on. What do you make of the stories out there that Nick Saban's saying at a coach's clinic that he sent 2 guys packing and told them basically he wasn't going to take them because he wasn't going to give them what they wanted NIL wise? Does that, I mean, it's Nick Saban, so it probably doesn't negatively affect him in recruiting. But is a recruit out there scratching their head a little bit about Alabama from an NIL standpoint? And does that narrative being out there affect Nick Saban and Alabama in any way, shape, or form in recruiting?
I think it affects them with a small percentage of kids.
Okay,
I think that there's still a portion of kids that know, hey, when we get to Alabama, we're still going to get some money, right? Like this isn't like, it's not like he's not giving money. Like, I think ultimately it's a small percentage of kids that are so NIL driven that that's all they talk about. That's all they want to talk about. I mean, there are kids that show up here or other schools that the moment they get here, they're like, okay, I want to talk to the collective. Okay, hey, I want to talk about NIL. Well, again, I had a coach tell me this, a couple of years ago, and he stands to be true. You don't have to come for all the right reasons, but you got to come for some of the right reasons. And if you're so NIL driven, then you're probably not coming for any of the right reasons. Again, you still got to want to go to Alabama or Tennessee or Georgia or Middle Tennessee State or wherever. Like it can't be money and only money. Those kids are a nightmare. And ultimately, I think the biggest thing is if you're a college coach, you're trying to weed those guys out of your program because they don't help the room at all.
The quote you're talking about too, if you go on, I think one of the players he's referencing asked to get his girlfriend into medical school as well, or something along those lines, something about a girlfriend getting into postgraduate school. And he was like, "No, I can't. Like, no, I'm not doing that. I can't do that." So I think a lot of that was.
Yeah. Whoa, wait a minute. That practice has been happening in recruiting long before NIL ever came about the transfer portal. There are sisters.
That's the one that you can do.
Yeah, I mean that one's the easy one to do, to get somebody into law school or to.
It might have been law school. I mean, it was either law or medical school, and I'm just sitting here like.
That one's easier to do than finding 7 figures for somebody. that practice has been happening for Austin for a long time in recruiting.
Well, 100%. I mean, like again, there are more than one ways to skin a cat, and for years that was always, getting the girlfriend admitted to school, or in this instance, it's into law school. That type of stuff's always been going on. And so, I mean, not shocking. I mean, like, look, Nick's kind of drew his line in the sand on some of this. I get it. It's the game's broken in certain ways, but it is the game right now that everybody has to play. And so until they change the rules, everybody's kind of got to swim in those waters, so to speak. But hey, you have to do it within the parameters of what you want as a football program. It's why I tweeted that out the other night when that got out there. I said, and this is why fans should realize that every situation is different. You don't know what these kids are asking for. So when their player leaves your program or you don't get the transfer you want, don't go, oh, it's ridiculous, Spire. It's ridiculous, Georgia Collective. It's ridiculous, whoever collective. Like, it's not as simple as that. It's never as simple as that. Like, it's not just write the check. At the end of the day, very few schools can just write any check they want. If any school can do that, actually. I mean, like a lot of this is, people think that all these schools have all this money and stuff, and I just think that it's coming up. It's not the case, and I think that's why you've seen a bunch of kids leave certain schools after just 1 year.
To answer your question, Brent, at least from my opinion, I agree with Austin. No, I don't think it's gonna maybe a small percentage of players, but at the end of the day, too, if you go to a school or go to, play for a coach for reasons outside of name, image, and likeness, I mean, for Nick Saban, go look, you got wins and you get drafted into the National Football League to where you make some real money.
I mean, I don't think suddenly they're going to have, a bad recruiting class. I was just, that's the first coach who has said it to that degree.
Yeah.
That has said, hey, I didn't take 2 guys because of money.
And
it's the first time we've seen that happen.
And he can do that
because of his success.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because he's got cachet. And he just had the number 1 recruiting class in the country.
Yeah.
It's Nick Saban. All right. Tennessee basketball is going to be at Florida on Wednesday. Going to be back home against Auburn on Saturday. Tennessee football recruiting. Tons of coverage up on the website right now and continue throughout the rest of the week over at Volquest.com. Appreciate you guys for hanging out with us here today on the Volquest podcast. Brent Hubbs, Austin Price, Rob Lewis. I am Eric Kane. We'll be back on Thursday for the Volquest Mailbag podcast. Until then, mahalo and have a great rest of your Tuesday, everybody.